listening to the Friday Five here on the Agent Survival Guide podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Ruppel, and this is our weekly list of 5 things you should know about. Today is January 30th. It's only been a week since our last Friday Five episode, but it feels like I have digested about 3 weeks worth of news since then. We will start out with some social media news, a quick mention to start. Coming in at number 5, earlier this week, Meta announced plans to offer a premium subscription for Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. So far, I've read that these premium offerings will, quote, unlock more productivity and creativity, end quote. They'll include some AI capabilities thanks to Meta's acquisition of Manus, an AI startup with several AI agents. And they'll also throw in some additional features not available to non-premium subscribers. Features will differ from platform to platform, which makes me think that these are going to be platform-specific subscriptions. And interestingly enough, the new premium subscriptions will be different than Meta verification. No word yet on whether users will be able to bundle subscriptions together across the apps or with Meta Verified. We'll be keeping an ear out for developments on these subscriptions. If you hear or see anything on your feeds, feel free to send us a tip via email. We will give you a shout out here on the show. Now on to number 4, a not so quick mention on social media that has a couple moving parts that we'll be weaving together. For the past year, TikTok has been working to make itself compliant with US regulations. In order to do that, the company had to divest itself of Chinese ownership and become majority owned by American companies. Last Thursday, TikTok officially announced that they had established the TikTok USDS Joint Venture LLC. While many companies publicly stated interest in the venture, ultimately, the new LLC found its American investors in Oracle, Silver Lake, MGX, Dell Family Office, and Susquehanna International Group, to name a few. According to the press release, Oracle, Silver Lake, and MGX each own 15% of TikTok USDS for a 45% share. The Dell Family Office, Vastmere Strategic Investments, Alpha Wave Partners, and others make up the, quote, full consortium of investors, end quote. ByteDance retains 19.9% control of TikTok USDS, making their share the largest single investor in TikTok here in the United States. That would mean that the consortium group owns 35.1%. Interesting math, considering the law originally made it sound like the majority of the company should be owned by American investors. Yet ByteDance is still the majority shareholder. That issue is one of many plaguing the app at the moment, including the fact that over the weekend when all of this transition was happening, TikTok USDS suffered from power outages that are ongoing at the time of publication. Also troubling, some creators are reporting a change in engagement now that ownership has switched, leading users to wonder if there's been a change in the algorithm. Further fanning those flames, users are reporting that they're being served content they've seen before, and users and creators are both claiming that they're having trouble uploading videos, especially those that are critical of President Trump's policies. Users have also reported having issues with certain words and phrases not showing up on TikTok. That wouldn't be surprising, considering that AlgoSpeak has evolved from users trying to creatively navigate around filters that prevent certain words or content from being posted. And then to top all of that off, there's a new TikTok competitor in the App Store that's been seeing a surge in downloads and might just give TikTok a run for its money. I mean, I know at one point the same thing was said for RedNote. Users also fled to Snapchat, Twitch, Clapper, Triller, and Zigazoo. More recently, I've heard users are moving to Skylight Social and Upscrolled, both of which I had not heard of until reading news about the TikTok sale, and then also reading about users seeking out alternatives. Apparently, Skylight Social is not the same as the Skylight Calendar, completely different companies. The social app is backed by Mark Cuban, and the calendar is a super cool touchscreen calendar and digital photo frame company that helps sync family calendars and photos. Upscrolled is the app that I have seen the most reports about lately as the go-to TikTok alternative. The app has made it to the number 2 top overall app for iOS, but on Google Play, Upscrolled has only made it to the number 65 spot on the list. Taking a little more granular look at the social apps category, Upscrolled moves up to the number 1 spot on iOS, trailed by Threads and WhatsApp. On Google Play, Upscrolled jumps up to the number 6 spot, behind Facebook, Threads, Instagram, and 2 different versions of TikTok. It'll be interesting to see how TikTok fares moving forward. One of the top questions on the minds of everyone is how the algorithm may or may not change now that TikTok USDS is in charge. According to the official press release from the new US-based LLC, quote, the joint venture will retrain, test, and update the content recommendation algorithm on US user data. The content recommendation algorithm will be secured in Oracle's US cloud environment, end quote. So the algorithm won't be looking at data outside the US, only US user data, which means there is a very distinct possibility of changes in content coming to a For You page near you. Now, of course, I can't say what those changes will look like for everyone, but I have seen the TikTok algorithm adjust quickly based on viewing habits. And for power users, those who are spending more time on TikTok than others, I would imagine that those changes happen even more quickly. I think it's a little too early to sound the death knell for TikTok. We have certainly seen some changes over the past few years with the implementation of the TikTok shop and how that changed content and engagement as well. I think it's reasonable to expect some growing pains moving forward. And I think overall, we've seen social media start to segment out into smaller players. But is this the final reckoning for TikTok? Too early to say, but we will be keeping an eye on this story and we'll be keeping you updated as well. And if you'd like more info on Upscrolled and Skylight Social in a future episode, let us know. Our email is in the notes. Reach out and we would be happy to answer your questions. Moving on now to number 3 on our list this week. Hard to believe that January 30th has arrived, and along with it, another deadline for funding the government, at least part of it. 6 appropriations bills were combined into a minibus appropriations package that passed through the House of Representatives last week. Midnight tonight is the deadline for the Senate to sign off on H.R. 7148, which seeks to approve funding for the Department of Defense, the Departments of Labor, Health and Human Services, and Education, the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Transportation, and the Department of Housing and Urban Development. The bill had bipartisan support in the Senate until the actions of ICE officials in Minnesota last week. Now, it's no longer certain that the Senate will vote the bill through with funding for Homeland Security included. Couple of things that are important to know should that bill stall. Other than the fact that we are looking at another potential government shutdown, there are some implications for Medicare, one of which, January 30th was the deadline for Medicare telehealth flexibilities, which Congress has been allowing to move through these funding votes by continuing resolutions rather than writing and passing permanent legislation. The HHS Appropriations Bill also contains future provisions for smart wearables, early detecting multi-cancer screenings, and rules for pharmacy benefit managers and their networks. Moving on to number 2. Monday, January 26th, was opening day for the IRS 2025 tax return season. As I was reading through the news, I noticed a mention about IRS funding and a government shutdown, which led me to dig a little bit deeper because I didn't see financial services funding in HR 7148. And it turns out that's because it's not there. The Department of Treasury funding appropriations bill is also awaiting a Senate vote. And that happens to be HR 7006. So different bill, different vote. But the government could shut down if HR 7148 doesn't get passed. And that would likely mean a delay for HR 7006, depending on where in the voting schedule that piece of legislation falls. But if you've been keen to get on with filing your 2025 taxes, if you've got your forms, you can go ahead and file them. Coming in at number 1, on Monday this week, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, our friends at CMS, released the 2027 Medicare Advantage and Part D Advance Notice. This is one of the annual pieces of legislation CMS releases, and it contains a smattering of information like payment policies, capitation rates, star ratings, and risk adjustment, to name a few. CMS assigns values to those different factors to come up with the revenue Medicare Advantage and Part D plans will be paid for a specific plan year. And this year's advance notice has a few notable areas to talk about. First up, the effective growth rate, or how much CMS predicts that costs will grow in the upcoming plan year. In the advance notice, CMS projects that MA and Part D program costs will increase by 4.97%. Star ratings are down this year, but down much less than they were for 2026. In both the 2026 advance notice and final rate announcement, they were down by 0.69%. For 2027, CMS projects star ratings to decrease again, but only by 0.03%, so not much of a change from 2026 to 2027 so far. Risk model revision and normalization is down 3.32% in the advance notice, and there are some interesting changes proposed for risk adjustment in Part C and D. CMS and the current administration has frequently mentioned their efforts to cut wasteful spending in all government programs. And that's the thinking behind the proposed changes outlined in the advance notice. In the press release, CMS mentions 3 principles they are using to approach changes to the risk adjustment system: simplifying the administrative burden, creating a system that fairly assesses plan value regardless of plan size, and also payments that mirror true health risk in a plan. And all of these things, in the eyes of the administration, should, quote, facilitate the efficient use of healthcare resources, enhanced program integrity, and greater accountability, end quote. 2 ways CMS is suggesting to do this. 1, and this is something they do regularly, updating diagnosis and expenditure data. For 2027, CMS plans to use diagnosis data from 2023 and expense data from 2024. The new data set would be used in version 28, the same classification system that we're using for 2026, just with newer data. This update would apply to both Medicare Advantage and Part D risk adjustment. Another proposal, changing risk adjustment on unlinked chart review records. CMS defines this as excluding, quote, diagnosis information not associated with a specific beneficiary encounter from risk score calculation starting in coverage year 2027. As a result, diagnoses that are not reported or associated with a service would not be considered for risk adjustment, end quote. Prior to the advance notice, CMS released a report on improper payments for fiscal year 2025. In their Medicare Advantage findings, CMS noted that, quote, most Part C improper payments were attributable to situations where the Medicare Advantage organization's supporting documentation failed to substantiate the beneficiary diagnosis data submitted for payment, end quote. So, possible insight into what CMS was thinking on this one. Interesting that implementation is being proposed for both Medicare Advantage and Part D risk adjustment. CMS did not mention a particular issue with Part D improper payments, other than highlighting the numbers. In 2024, the Part D improper payment rate was 3.7%. CMS estimated it to be 4% in 2025. Back to the numbers reported in the advance notice. According to CMS calculations for 2027, risk model revisions and normalization should bring down cost by 3.32%, and the changes to diagnosis sources should further bring down cost by 1.53%. Combine them all together, and we get the relatively unchanged 0.09% increase in plan revenue for plan year 2027. Not great news, but something I do want to mention again here. My typical disclaimer that this is draft legislation. We have seen numbers change between the advance notice and the final rate announcement before. Also, per usual, CMS is seeking comments on the advance notice between now and February 25th. CMS did state in the advance notice that they plan to release their 2027 rate announcement by April 6th, 2026. We have marked that date on our calendars, and we'll be reporting back here should we hear any updates on that or the other items from this episode. And of course, if you would like to read more about what we mentioned here today, we do provide links to our resources and references in the episode notes. Also there, the links to connect with us, whether that's emailing a question into the show, reaching out to the sales team at Ritter Insurance Marketing, the FMO that powers this podcast, following us on social media, or following along with our show. You can do all of those things from the comfort of our episode notes, which have been thoughtfully curated for you, just like the contents of this episode. We will be back next week with another recap as well as some other episodes in between. But until then, I hope you have a great weekend. Stay healthy and stay safe out there, and we will see you next week. The Agent Survival Guide podcast is a production of Ritter Insurance Marketing, an integrity company. This episode was written and produced by me, Sarah Ruppel. Script editing and fact check by Emily Ryan. Podcast design by Urban Rivera. Follow along with our show wherever you like to listen.